Welcome to Halloween, the time where the living and the dead hold hands and dance around in little tiny circles with enough room for the Holy Spirit between them. The time for witches and goblins and ghouls aplenty. The time to be scared. The time for tricks. The time for treats. And the time to read scary stories. When I was a kid, I was addicted to creepypastas. I was ravenous. I just loved reading those creepy fucking stories. They were so alluring, even though I would be unable to fall asleep at night for weeks. I remember the first thing that ever scared the shit out of me was an episode of The Amanda Show where a rooster is implied to eat somebody, and that terrified me. I was sure that there was going to be a rooster in my bathroom for probably about a month every time I pulled back the shower curtain. So I'm not a stranger to fear. But on Halloween, I figured I would take your hand and lead you into the realm of spooky stories. I have personally curated several different stories for your viewing pleasure. Now, get a drink, kick your paws up, turn off the lights, grab a snack, and let's get started. Dark ambience. Here we go. Ooh. Okay, Crow recommended this one to us. Crow recommended this one. So, I've never read this one. This one's called Escape from Terminus. Before Dungeons and Dragons. Before Empire of the Petal. Wait. Oh, okay, this is the story. I thought this was like a prologue about the story. Before Dungeons and Dragons. Before Empire of the Petal. Throne. Before Chainmail, White Bear, and Red Moon. Or even Siege of Bodenberg. There was Escape from Terminus. Considered by some to be the father of modern tabletop role-playing. Escape from Terminus was first distributed by Albion Games in 1965. 1965, dude! Old as hell! What the hell? Bitches are still playing like Risk. Dude, Maverick, thank you for the sub to Snack Love. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Hold on, I have to make it Halloween themed.
The spirits have been appeased, Maverick. Thank you.
Did you guys hear that? That was creepy. There was some dude here. 1 year later, the company folded. Of the 700 initial prints, less than 50 were sold. But in the years leading up to the game explosion of the 70s, Escape from Terminus became an underground hit. Loose leaf binders filled with dog-eared photocopies of its 343-page rulebook made the rounds at VCon, a Canadian fantasy and sci-fi gaming convention, in 1973, along with the perforated cardboard sheets that could be folded into the special dice needed to play. Dang, my narration voice kind of going crazy, dude. I got that like draw. Dude, that's way too long of a rulebook, by the way. I would never fucking play a game with a 353-page rulebook. Fuck that. No, hell no. Despite the rabid interests, most of these binders were incomplete. Entire chapters were missing. People desperate to complete the game filled these gaps with homebrew rules. Others would mistake these pages for originals and insert copies into their own rulebooks. Over time, this made it all but impossible to tell which pages were authentic and which were written by overzealous players. This is literally just the Bible. This is what happened with the Bible. Is this not the Bible? Interest in Escape from Terminus waned in the late 70s and early 80s. Simpler and more accessible games, Dungeons & Dragons, Tunnels, and Trolls, Rollmaster rose in popularity. Nevertheless, it retained a small and active audience who sought to outwit the cruel and relentless Minotaur. The game is set in a sprawling complex of hexagon-shaped chambers, connected by doors on all 6 sides. Players navigate this infinite maze of hexes one move at a time, adding each room to their map as they go. Oh, now it's like Cube. Cube is another good movie. I fucking love the Cube. So you're in this like hexagonal, this like tabletop of like exploring an infinite hexagonal prison. The content of a hex is determined by rolling dice and consulting reference tables. A room can contain traps, items, messages, rations, even the bodies of previous players. With no combat mechanics, the game focuses on exploration and survival. But what made Escape from Terminus unique was how you played it, alone, with no companions and no dungeon master. Ooh, I just gave myself goose pimples, dude. I just gave myself, like, I got fucking the shivers. Once you died, either from a trap, starvation, or the Minotaur, the hex you perished in was marked. The map was then passed on to another player, who started again. When entering a room that had been explored previously by someone else, new reference tables simulated the passage of time and the actions of the Minotaur. You could also leave behind items for the next player, or provide hints written in chalk. These messages were included with the map in sealed envelopes marked by the hex's number. After years of playing, each map developed a life of its own. Players recognized landmarks and paid their respects in hexes where previous runs met their untimely end. Others created elaborate strategies tailored to the layout of their map. Rooms could contain dozens of messages that had accumulated over decades of play. Even the Minotaur's behavior felt unique to each game, as if its personality were dictated by the map in which it lived. So wait, I'm confused. This is like a tabletop game, but how is the information being disseminated amongst players? Did I miss how did it describe that? Hi Leon, welcome on in. We're reading a scary story. We're reading a short horror story called Escape from Terminus. I'm trying to decipher it as we go and provide commentary as well. Because as far as I'm aware, it's a story, Neon, go forward, passed along player to player manually. Okay, so these guys are like packaging it in like envelopes and stuff and disseminating it. Okay. Eventually, the sheer size of the map required multiple sheets of meticulous notes regarding how each part fit together. In some cases, it grew so large that it could no longer be shipped from one player to the next. The longest ongoing session of Escape from Terminus started in 1974 between a group of friends in Minnesota, eh? Hey, Billy, I will play that new game, eh? Oh, Escape from Terminus, yeah? It was then passed on to their friends who passed it on to theirs. In 1985, the map grew so large that it had to be moved into the basement of a local game shop before the last player vanished in 2008. The map allegedly includes well over 200,000 hexes and 600 messages, only a handful of which have ever been read. In 2005, a web forum named Terminus Velocity was established as a hub for Escape from Terminus players eager to beat the game. Participants scanned every map and rulebook they could find. They then combed through gigabits of handwritten data and produced the first attempts at an optimum strategy. Everything in Escape from Terminus is resolved via a complex mechanic that uses 6 7-sided die in addition to a coin flip, producing the probability range of an inverted bell curve. The result is checked against several hundred reference tables with different outputs. Modifiers, plus or minus, are applied to the roll according to circumstances, items, and even adjacent hexes. The game ends when someone finds the escape hex, a hex containing the stairs out. Since each hex is randomly generated, optimizing Escape from Terminus meant maximizing the chance of spawning this hex. Oh my god, this is getting really confusing for my brain. It's a lot of math, bro, for a horror story, but I appreciate the world building. Also, can we talk about how the last player disappeared in 2008? What happened? Also, here's a illustration of the aforementioned Minotaur. Source unknown posted in IRC chat on October 27th, 2011. Nearly 13 years to this day. The mark of the beast. 13. Wait, no, that's 6. 6 plus 6 plus 1. You! Anyway, ongoing. But there was a problem. The Minotaur. Every time someone came close to spawning the hex, they fell prey to Escape from Terminus's unseen nemesis, either via a trap it set, a door it locked, or an object it destroyed. Maximizing the chance of an escape hex also maximized the chance of the Minotaur's presence. Despite years of frantic attempts, Most players eventually recognized that spawning an exit and not dying was virtually impossible. Once players realized the game was effectively unwinnable, most of the community went silent. It's kind of impressive for them to crack it for like 50 years. This game came out in the 60s and it took it all the way until 2011 to be like, man, this game doesn't fucking let you win. They're like, we've been playing this game for 50 fucking years and nobody's ever won. How strange is that? Most of the community went silent. The web forum unexpectedly dropped offline in 2012, taking most of what we know about Escape from Terminus with it. An incomplete rulebook or box filled with pages from an abandoned campaign will occasionally show up at a yard sale somewhere, but otherwise, Escape from Terminus has become an obscure footnote in the history of tabletop games. One last thing. 2 days prior to going offline, Terminus Velocity experienced a brief flurry of activity. A new thread managed to generate more replies in 24 hours than every previous thread combined. The post in question: "Hey guys, Randall Petrov's son here. He was part of Albion Games in the 60s. I know he would be so honored by and proud of everything you've done here. You all have gone far beyond what he and Albion ever hoped and gave new life to the Terminus story. It's so exciting to read through all the different variations. I wanted to ask though, whose idea was the Minotaur?" Oh! Whoa! That's... I wasn't expecting that twist. What a twist! Ooh! Ooh! Whoa! Whoa! Ooh! Another spooky tale to keep you up at night. Ooh! I like the idea that there's this like creature that effectively makes the game unwinnable and that somebody invented. To me, this could be spooky, or it could just be some dude fucking around back when they were making homebrew rules to try to fuck everyone over, and then they just managed to make this game unwinnable. It definitely reads it as like an entity has attached himself to this tabletop game, which also haunted tabletop game is so unique and so much harder to do properly. Because when you have a video game, you can be like, and then my screen glitched out. But to have a game that is pencil and paper be haunted, much harder to explain away. My pencil started glitching out and writing things on the paper by itself. Oh, this is, if you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me. If you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me. Make it a headshot. Shoot me in the temple, aiming slightly downward. I need the bullet to travel the shortest possible distance through my brain before it hits my hippocampus. If I'm lucky, the sensation of the gunshot ripping through my skull will only last a few decades. As awful as this sounds, you'll be doing me an enormous favor. Death by a headshot, as soon as possible, is vastly better than the alternative. My ordeal started over 10,000 years ago at 10:15 this morning. I earn extra money by participating in drug trials. I'm a so-called healthy subject who takes experimental drugs to help assess side effects. Once, it was a kidney drug. A few times, it's been something for blood pressure or cholesterol. This morning, they told me the drug I took was a psychoactive substance intended to accelerate brain function. None of the drugs I had tested so far have ever done anything for me in the recreational sense. In other words, none of the drugs I've tested have ever given me a killer buzz, or mellowed me out, or anything. Maybe I've always ended up the placebo group, but nothing I've tested has affected me at all. Today's drug was different. That shit worked. They gave me a pill at 10:15 and told me to hang out in the waiting room until they called me back for some tests. Only about 30 minutes, the research assistant told me. I flopped onto the waiting room couch and read a few articles from a copy of Psychology Today that was sitting on the coffee table. They hadn't called me back when I finished the Psychology Today, so I picked up a US News and read it cover to cover. Then I read an old Scientific American. What was taking them so damn long? I don't think I could ever do this. What do you guys do? I don't think I could ever be like a guinea pig for medicine. Like, if Elon Musk was like, bro, I will give you $100,000 to put this chip in your brain. Fuck no. Hell fucking no. Hell no, I'm not gonna let you do that. I don't want to take no kidney medication. I don't want to take no psychoactive substance, experimental substance. That would be fucked up. I sluggishly turned my head to look at the wall clock. It was only 10:23 a.m. I had read all 3 magazines in 8 minutes. I remember thinking this was going to be a long day, and I was right. The waiting room had a little bookshelf with some used hardcovers on it. When I stood up to walk to the bookshelf, it felt like my legs barely worked. It's not that they were weak. They were just slow. It took a full minute just to stand up off the couch, and another minute to take 2 steps to the bookcase. I scanned the old books on the shelf and picked out a copy of Moby Dick. My arms had the same problems as my legs. Just reaching one foot in front of the other to grab the book took a long time. I actually got bored just waiting for my hand to reach the spine of the book. Imagine just reaching for a book and it just takes so goddamn long. You're like, oh my god, can I please reach this book yet? I slogged back to the couch and collapsed onto it in a slow motion fall that reminded me of the low gravity hops of astronaut on the moon. I opened Moby Dick very slowly and began reading. I started with Call Me Ishmael and got as far as Ahab throwing his pipe into the sea, which was all the way to friggin' chapter 30 before they called me back. How are you feeling? The research assistant asked. I feel slow, I said.
Actually, it's the other way around. Everything seems slow because you're so fast.
But my legs, my arms, they're moving in slow motion.
Your body seems to be moving slowly because your brain is fast. Your brain is running 10 or 20 times faster than normal. You are thinking and perceiving reality at accelerated pace, but your body is still constrained by the laws of biomechanics. Frankly, you're moving much faster than a normal person.
She pantomimed a jogging motion.
But your brain is running so much faster right now that even your fast walk seems so slow to you.
I thought about my slow motion flop onto the waiting room couch. Even if my muscles had slowed down, my body would still react to gravity the same way. But in that waiting room, I even fell in slow motion. Slow muscles couldn't explain why gravity seemed weaker. My brain was going at warp 10. That's how I managed to read 3 magazines and the first 30 chapters of Moby Dick in 15 minutes. They ran a series of tests on me. The physical tests were fun. They made me juggle 3 balls, then 4, then 6. I had no problem keeping 6 balls in the air because they seemed to be moving so slowly. It was boring, frankly, waiting for each ball to move through its arc so I could catch it with my slow motion hands and toss it back into the air. They threw Cheerios in the air and I caught them with chopsticks. Wow, that's pretty cool. Hi Jack, we're back. Yes, you are back to Creepypastas. I'm showing chat one of my favorite short stories. They dropped a handful of coins and I counted the total value before they hit the ground. The cognitive tests were less fun, but very illuminating. Finish a 50-word word search, 3 seconds. Solve an intricate maze drawn onto a poster-sized paper, 2 seconds. View a slideshow projected at 10 images per second and answer detailed questions about what I saw, 95% correct. They told me I measured over 250 on the Knopf scale. Apparently, that's deep into the superhuman range of thinking speeds. They then sent me home. It'll wear off in a few hours, they said, which will seem like days to you. Try to use the residual effects to get some work done. Catch up on work emails while you're still in high speed mode. The ride home was horrible. It was only 3 metro stops, and in real world time, it took about 35 minutes. But in my drug accelerated hyper time, it felt like days. Days. Just walking out of the medical research suite to the elevator seemed like it took an hour. I sprinted out of the office, willing my legs to push me faster. But the laws of biomechanics held me prisoner. As accelerated as my brain was, I couldn't do anything to make my legs work faster. The huge disconnect between my body and mind made it extremely difficult to judge how and when to slow down, turn, or rotate my body. I had basically turned into a giant slow motion spaz. I misjudged my speed and rammed into the wall by the elevator button at a pretty good speed. Even though I could see the wall coming at me, I couldn't make my finger outstretched to hit the elevator button move away fast enough, and I jammed it against the wall. Oh! Oh, dude. Ooh. There's nothing worse than like jamming your fucking finger. One time I was playing kickball and the ball came down right on my thumb. Dude, my thumb hurt for like weeks. It was awful. Ugh. Hard. The pain was intense. If my brain had been running at regular speed, it would have only hurt for 30 seconds or so. But in my accelerated state, the intense pain seemed to last for half an hour, 45 minutes maybe. The elevator ride was horrible. It felt like I spent 4 or 5 hours just descending 7 floors, with nothing to look at but the interior of the elevator car. I sprinted to the metro station. I have to admit, this part was almost fun. Even though my body moved at, which seemed to me, super slow speeds, I could still carefully choose how and where to place my feet, swing my arms, and turn my torso. It only took a block or two to get used to having a brain that ran 24 times faster than my body. Then, I basically sprint danced the rest of the way, twisting and juking between people on the sidewalk, and dodging moving cars with inches, aka minutes, of clearance. I spent an hour in my time frame descending into the subway and running into the platform. Endless tedium waiting the 6 minutes for the red line train to arrive. Although there were more to look at on the metro platform than inside the elevator, it still was intensely boring. I should have stolen that copy of Moby Dick. The red line train roared into the station in slow motion. The normally high-pitched squeal of its brakes were frequency shifted by my high-speed mind to be long, low tone, like a monotone tuba solo. Boo. Dude, I would be so bored. Like, with ADHD already, this shit would be so unbelievably boring to me. Because I would already be so antsy. Imagine and getting trapped inside your own mind. Hi, N64 gamer, trick or treat, smell my paws, I want candy in my maw. Woof, woof. It wasn't just the squealing subway train that was 3 octaves lower than normal. All sound was slowed to the point of near inaudibility. Voices were gone, shifted below the threshold frequency of my hearing. I did manage to hear a screaming baby on my subway car. Her shriek slowed to sound like whale song. Sharp sounds like a car horn and trucks bouncing over potholes were low, muddied roars like distant thunder. Back at the research office, I could hear and communicate with the research staff, but now verbal communication with anyone would be impossible. The effects of the drug were still intensifying. I spent what seemed like days on that fucking red line train. Days. Listening to the whale song of the screaming baby and the tuba solo of the brakes. Where ordinary voices were frequency shifted out of my audio range, smells didn't seem to be affected. I never became nose blind to the body odor, the stench of the train's brakes, and melange of farts and other smells wafting through the metro car. Ew! I finally got back to... Yo, bulge sniffing on this drug would be crazy. I finally got back to my apartment. Sprinting through my open doors into the front hall at full speed was like a slow, relaxing drift down a lazy river. I was relieved to be home. At least I had stuff I could do here. I picked up the book I was reading, 100 Years of Solitude, and finished it. Despite turning the pages so quickly that I tore many of them, it seemed like most of the time I spent finishing the book was spent on page turning and not actually reading. 3 minutes had passed since I got home. I tried surfing the internet. My god, it takes a long time for computers to boot these days, but it was too frustratingly slow. Hours seemingly to load each new page, and fraction of a second to read it. 100 articles in my newsfeed read, just 3 minutes done. Oh wait, 100 articles in my newsfeed read, and just 3 more minutes done. Dude, imagine trying to jack off on this drug, and you're trying to like look at some E6 or something, and it takes like hours to switch the page. Oh. Terrible. Terrible. Nightmare. I dipped my pile of yet to be read books and finished 2 more. 4 more minutes had passed. I decided to try and sleep off the remaining effects of the drug. Unfortunately, whatever part of my mind is responsible for perception, the part that's been accelerated to hyper speeds by the drug, isn't the same as the part that governs sleep. Despite being awake for what I perceived as days, my physical brain still thought it was 1:25 p.m. It was not ready for sleep. Nevertheless, I tried to sleep. I walked to my bedroom, a 45-minute drift through my apartment, and flung myself into bed, lazily falling like a feather onto the mattress. Why is this worded like that one Ninja tweet where he's like, so there I was, solo bot lane, just got a pentakill when my girlfriend, shirtless, comes in with a sandwich unasked for and gives it to me with chips. So how's your day going? I closed my eyes and laid there for hours and hours, 10 minutes of reality time before giving up. Sleep would not come. I was facing what was going to feel like days, or maybe even weeks of being trapped in slow motion prison. Advertisements. Ooh! Ooh! Scary! So I took an Ambien. The sensation of the pill and the splash of water I used to swallow it sliding to the back of my throat was sickening. A lump that blocked my breathing, moving like a slug down my esophagus. I read a book. 10 minutes had passed. I read another. 18 minutes since I took the Ambien. I threw the book across the room in disgust at my situation. The book slowly corroded and spun through the air. What the fuck does corroded mean? That's a good word. What does corroded mean? Pirote? What is that? What does that word mean? Yeah, I know what it's spelled like. To spin? Oh, okay. To spin? Pirouette? Pirouetted and spun through the air, like a leaf blowing in a breeze. It hit the wall with a long, faint rumble, the only sound I had heard for what seemed like hours. The only sound I had for what seemed like hours. Yo, they needed to use spell check on this bitch. Then drifted to the floor like a flip-flop, sinking in a swimming pool. Interesting, very illuminating verbiage. The force of gravity hadn't changed since I took the pill. The laws of physics were still the same. It was just that my perception of time had gone wackadoo. That's a word I would use for it. Bye, Big Wolf! Someone actually made a sequel to this story. Based on how long it took the book to drift to the floor, I estimated the effects of the drug were still intensifying. I read a magazine. I turned on the television. I clearly saw each frame of video like I was watching a slideshow. Frustrated, I turned the television off. I read some more. The first 2 books of Churchill's A History of the English-Speaking Peoples. Not exactly a light read, and frankly, I hated it. But given the hours of tedium it would take to go get another book off my bookshelf, just sitting on the couch and reading Churchill was better, or at least less worse. It had now been 35 minutes since I took the Ambien. I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. Time passed. I inhaled. An hour-long process. Time passed. I exhaled for more hours. Sleep would not come. I needed a new plan. I decided to go back to the offices where they gave me the drug. Maybe they would have something that would counteract its effects, or at least knock me out until it wore off. I exited my apartment as fast as possible, taking hours in my time frame to do so. I didn't even bother locking the door. It would have taken too long. Down the stairs. It's faster than the elevator if you run. Through the lobby, out the front door, and onto the street. These few things felt like a long day at the office. Sprinting down the street, dancing and weaving between pedestrians with what must have looked like them superhuman dexterity. Down the first flight of stairs at the metro, across the landing, another hour, then onto the second flight of stairs. That's when the Ambien hit. The Ambien didn't make me sleepy. No, not at all. Instead, it must have had a severe cross-reaction with the experimental drugs I took this morning. Why would you take another drug, especially fucking Ambien, after still in the effects of a psychoactive drug that slows down time? I was bounding down the second flight of stairs, moving in slow motion, but still making perceptible progress. Then, wham! Everything stopped. The dull roar of the street and metro noise ceased, replaced by the most perfect silence I've ever experienced. My downward motion seemed to completely freeze. Before the Ambien kicked in, my perception of time was maybe a few hundred times slower than real time. After the Ambien took effect, time moved thousands of times slower. Every second seemed like days. Even just moving my eyes to focus on a new point was like impossibly slow scroll across my visual field. Over the course of the afternoon, I learned how to walk, run, and jump when my mind ran hundreds of times faster than my body. But with another 4 or 5 orders of magnitude of slowdown caused by the Ambien, body control was almost impossible. I fell on the stairs. Even though I was all but frozen in mid-step, controlling my muscles was impossible. I commanded my foot forward for hours, then backwards for hours more when it seemed like I would miss the next step. Hours attempting to adjust the angle of my ankle, then readjusting when it felt wrong. Oh my god. Bro is so fucking stoned. That's why we don't do drugs, kids. Despite the efforts, I rolled my ankle onto the next step. The pain wasn't at all mitigated by the slowness. Hours of increasing strain on my bent ankle. Ugh! The nerve signals that send pain into my brain must work differently than the nerves in my ear. Sonic energy was spread out all over time, diluted until it was imperceptible. Pain flowed into my brain, undiluted by the change in my perception of time. Hours and hours of increasing weight on my turned ankle turned into hours of increasing pain upon increasing pain. Oh! I pitched forward, my high-speed mind completely unable to control my low-speed body. I drifted downwards for days, managing to rotate my torso enough to keep my head from impacting the ground first. I eventually landed on my right shoulder. At first, the impact wasn't even noticeable. Then I felt a slight pressure in my shoulder as it came into contact with the ground. The pressure grew, bringing increasing pain for hour upon hour. My shoulder finally gave out, popping out of its socket with an endlessly sickening tug. Now I remember why this one freaked me out so much. Just dislocating your shoulder with like endless amounts of perception in what actually only happens in seconds. I came to a stop days later, crumpled out onto the ground, staring at the ceiling. The pain in my shoulder still screaming with intensity of a fresh violent injury. I had plenty of time to think during that fall. If every second seemed like days to me, then each minute of real world time would be years. Even if the drug cleared out of my system in the next 2 or 3 hours, this nightmare would last centuries. By the time I hit the ground, I had a plan. I would somehow get to the platform and throw myself in front of a train. I twisted onto my hands and knees, days of my dislocated shoulder crying for relief. I misjudged my rotation and rolled onto my back. I tried again, collapsing on my face as I tried to figure out how to control a body that moved slower than grass grew. Bro's playing co-op. This is now just officially co-op. Oh. I would definitely, if this was happening to me, like, I wouldn't be able to control my body either. I would definitely feel like a meat puppet. And also, I wouldn't be confident in my fucking, like, rotation, you know? Like, I would always be second guessing. I'm like, oh no, this step's fucked up. I gotta adjust. Weeks of effort. Wait, yes. Weeks of effort were finally rewarded with success. I stabilized onto my hands and knees. If just getting onto all fours was this difficult, I figured that walking or running was completely out of the question. So I crawled. I crawled through the metro tunnel. The dumb looks on the faces in the crowd lingered on me for weeks. I crawled under the turnstile and onto the escalator. The escalator spilled the rush hour crowd onto the platform at the same speed a glacier spills ice into the sea. I looked out over the crowded platform during my interminable downward ride. This guy must have been writing this with a fucking thesaurus next to him. I need a thesaurus for speaking. The train status said the next train wouldn't arrive for 20 minutes. 20 minutes was like a year to me. I'd have to spend a year on the metro platform waiting to die. I crawled off the escalator, enduring days of stupid expressions on the commuters' faces. I crawled a few feet to a concrete bench and curled up next to it, trying to find a position to lessen the pain in my shoulder. Then my problem with time got worse. Impossibly worse. The massive slowdown on the stairs was just the beginning of the interaction between the experimental drug and the Ambien. It fully hit me when I curled up by the bench. I blinked. Years of darkness followed. Sound was already gone, and with my blink, sight was gone as well. All that existed was the pain from my fall. My hyper-accelerated mind wasted no time compensating for the lack of sensory input. Voices spoke to me. They sung to me in languages that never existed. Patterns and faces and colors came and went into my mind's eye. I recalled my whole life and then I imagined another. I forgot English. I settled into a profound despair. And then I spoke to God. I became God. I imagined new universe and brought to life with my thoughts. Then I did it all over again. And again. My eyes opened with geologic slowness. A faint glow. Weeks. A slit of light. Weeks. A narrow view of the metro platform. Ankles of the commuters near me, and an advertisement on the opposite wall. Dude, this is so fucked. You just like, what would you imagine for like hundreds and thousands of years? Dude, your imagination would get so fucking good, actually. You would come out like super like introspective. You would know how to like control everything about your body with your mind. That would be amazing. You would come out of this like Gandalf the White. Imagine a neon stream for 100,000 years. Oh my god, that's a lot of daily doses of internet. Ugh. I extracted my phone from my pocket. A project that spanned decades. How can I even explain the boredom? The pain in my shoulder is nothing compared to the boredom. Even every thought I can think. I have thought hundreds of times already. The view of ankles and the advertisements never changes. Never. The boredom is so intense, it's tangible, like a solid object of metal and stone wedged into my skull. Inescapable. What are my options? If I crawl and fall into the tracks without an oncoming train to crush me, I won't die. I'll experience even more pain from the 4-foot fall, but I'll more likely be rescued by some do-gooder on the platform and unable to act when the train finally does arrive. My suffering in that scenario will be endless. So I wait for the train, so I can throw myself under it. When it finally hits me, I will experience the pain of being ripped to pieces for centuries until finally, the light of life leaves my brain and my experience ends. I've lived hundreds of lifespans at the foot of this bench. I am far older in spirit than any human who has ever lived. Most of my life experience has been a snapshot of pain, huddled onto the floor of a subway platform, with an unchanging view of ankles and advertisements. This post is my plan B, my Hail Mary, and my long shot. I've spent lifetimes typing and posting this message in the hopes that someone will read it and become convinced that my suffering must end. Someone on this platform right now. Someone who will find the man curled under the bench, the man who crawled down the escalator, and kill him as swiftly as possible, a bullet to the temple. If you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me. Ooh. Oh, it just gets so much worse, dude. Like at first you're like, okay, that's pretty funny. But then like it gets worse, dude. Whoa, spooky, spooky. Ooh, ooh. Kept making everything worse for himself. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, my boy literally did everything wrong, right? Like he did everything wrong. He should have just fucking went home and been bored for a few days. Cause that's all it would have been. That's all it would have been. Also, I think it's a clever way to be like, oh, my time perception is slowed down. Ooh, so I'm writing this story, and it also means that it has a excuse for why it's written poorly in certain places. Although, if you're writing this story out on the Metro and it's taking multiple lifetimes to write the story, why are you making so many damn analogies? Sank like a flip-flop in the ocean? Was that extra 100,000 years worth it to put that analogy in the story? Stuck in the DBZ time chamber? Katana Zero has this plot as a plot point where there's a drug that they give you so you can slow everything down in game. But there's bits of lore where the drug was tested on 2 guys and they had too high of a dose and time came to a standstill and they were trapped forever in stasis. He loves the drama. What can he say? I know, right? Like, he's so dramatic. Like, he's got such a flair. Oh, I just got here. Why was his time perception fucked? So our protagonist took an experimental drug which was meant to speed up his brain's perception. And then he went home and decided that it was so boring because time was so slow. And even though his brain was working at that speed, his body couldn't keep up. So everything was in slow motion for him. And think of like how the Flash goes when he starts running and shit, like time slows down and he puts a baby in the microwave type shit. So he tries to go to sleep it off, but he can't go to sleep, so he very, very smartly takes an Ambien, which has to be the dumbest decision in this entire fucking story. Whose decision is to take an Ambien? Why would you take a dissociative drug right after, like literally probably like an hour after taking the drug? So he takes an Ambien, and then it slows down his perception of time until it takes like, you know, we're talking lifetimes to blink type shit. And he just wants to end it. So he's like pleading the reader to come and kill him. I love this story. It's really short. It's really concise. It's got a really good plot. And it just keeps getting worse. Like when he pops his shoulder out and he just, for the first time, you're like, oh my God, you imagine just popping your shoulder out of your socket and that immense like searing pain and pain that lasts for years is just so horrifying. Have you ever been to the Saw convention in Orlando? SawCon? No, I've never been to SawCon. No, I've never ever been to SawCon. What's SawCon? In the last decade and a half, it's become infinitely easier to obtain exactly what you're looking for by way of a couple keystrokes. The internet has made it all too simple to use a computer to change reality. An abundance of information is merely a search engine away, to the point where it's hard to imagine life as any different. Yet, a generation ago, when the words of streaming and torrent were meaningless save for conversations about water, creepypasta writers love their flair, dude. They love their dramatic flair so goddamn much. They love it. The words streaming and torrent were meaningless, save for conversations about water. Like the writer was cooking with that one. Their pen was on fire when they were writing that. Oh my God. What's a horror story without a little bit of whimsy? Speaking of water, cheers. Grant has made it home from the hospital. I'm so happy that they're home from the hospital. I hope you're doing okay. Thank you for the hydrate. Oh. Anyway, people met face to face to conduct software swap parties. Ayo, who wants to swap some software with me? Ayo, you can upload all your data. Woof. Trading games and applications on Sharpie labeled 5 1/4 inch floppies. I don't know, what's a floppy disk, chat? Of course, most of the time, the meets were a way for frugal, community-minded individuals to trade popular games like King Quest and Maniac Mansion amongst themselves. However, a few early programming talents designing their own computer games to share amongst their circle of acquaintances, who would in turn pass them on until, if fun and well-designed enough, an independently developed game had its place in the collection of aficionados across the country. Think of it as an 80s equivalent of a viral video. Say psych right now? The question better be a joke. What question? What are you talking, chat? What are you talking about? It's a hard drive when it's not excited? Oh, a floppy disk? You asked what's a floppy disk? What? You actually don't know? No, I'm just fucking with you. Ooh, happy Halloween! Another trick from Neon! Jump scare. Ah! Gotcha. Don't worry, chat. I'm not gonna jump scare you. Ah! Anyway. I'm gonna get a middle finger emote just for you. I need a middle finger emote so bad. I was expecting the eyebrow. No. Eyebrows on strike today. Anyway, of course, most of the time the meets were blah blah blah. However, a few early programming talents designed their own computer games to share amongst their circle of acquaintances, which would input a viral video. Okay, we already read that one. Pale Luna, on the other hand, was never circulated outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. California. Always California. Can't trust them. All known copies have been long disposed of. All computers that ever ran the game now detritus, buried under layers of filth and polystyrene. Damn, I fucking nailed that pronunciation of polystyrene. This fact is attributed to a number of rather abstruse design choices made by its programmer. Pale Luna was a text adventure in the vein of Zork and the Lurking Horror, at a time when the said genre was swiftly going out of fashion. Upon booting up the game, player was presented with an almost completely blank screen except for the text. Oh, I have to get out my robot for the PC voice. Where's my robot voice?
You are in a dark room. Moonlight shines through the window. There is gold in the corner, along with a shovel and rope. There is a door to the east. Command. So.
That's what I imagine he sounds like. So began the game that one writer for a long out-of-print magazine fanzine decried as enigmatic, nonsensical, and completely unplayable, as the only commands that the game would accept were pick up gold, pick up shovel, pick up rope, open door, and go east. The player was soon presented with the following.
Reap your reward. Pale Luna smiles at you. You are in a forest. There are paths to the north, west, and east. Command.
I don't really like that robot voice. It's too high-pitched. What quickly infuriated the few who played this game was the confusing and buggy nature of the second screen onward. Only one of the directional decisions would be the correct one. For example, on this occasion, a command to go in the direction other than north would lead to the system freezing, requiring the operator to hard reboot the entire computer. Okay, that just sounds like most indie horror games I've played on stream. Furthermore, any subsequent screams seem to merely repeat above text, with the difference being only the directions available. Worse still, the standard text adventure commands appeared to be useless. The only accepted non-movement related prompt were use gold, which caused the game to display this message. Not here. Use shovel, which brought up not now. And use rope, which prompted the text, you've already used this. Okay, I'm gonna guess the plot right now. Main character hung themselves in the game. That's what I'm guessing. That's what I'm guessing the big twist is that you're already dead. Most of the players, most who played the game processed a couple of screens into it before becoming fed up, having to constantly reboot the devices. Gamba? Well, you could just look it up and fake the Gamba, so that's kind of cheating. Having to constantly reboot the devices and tossing the disk in disgust, writing off the experience as a shoddily programmed farce. However, there is one thing about the world of computers that remains true no matter the era. Some people who use them have too much time on their hands. Ooh, calling out with that little fourth wall break from the author, calling out the people really like fucking nerds. A young man by the name of Michael Nevins decided to see if there was more to Pale Luna than what met the eye. 5 hours and 33 screens worth of trial and error and unplugged computer cords later, he finally managed to make the game display different text. The text in this new area read, Pale Luna smiles wide. There are no paths. Pale Luna smiles wide. The ground is soft. Pale Luna smiles wide. Here. Command? It was another hour still before Nevin stumbled upon the proper combination of phrases to make the game process any further. Dig hole, drop gold, then fill hole. This caused the screen to display congratulations. Oh, we got coordinates. Okay, I'm gonna guess that there's a body buried at the coordinates. Upon which the game ceased to accept commands, requiring the user to reboot one last time. After some deliberation, Nevins came to the conclusion that the number referred to lines of latitude and longitude. The coordinates led to a point in the sprawling forest that dominated the nearby Lassonde Volcanic Park. As he possessed much more free time than sense, Nevins vowed to see Pale Luna through to its ending. The next day, armed with a map, a compass, and a shovel, he navigated the park's trails, noting with amusement how each turn he made corresponded roughly to those he took in-game. Uh-oh. Where's the gold? Where's the fucking gold? Where's the money, Lebowski? Though he initially regretted bringing the cumbersome digging tool on a mere hunch, the path similarity all but confirmed his suspicion that the journey would end with him face to face with an eccentric's buried treasure. Out of breath after a tricky struggle to the coordinates, he was pleasantly surprised by a literal stumble upon a patch of uneven dirt. Okay, so he literally ate shit. Shoveling as excitedly as he was, it would be an understatement to say he was taken aback when his heavy strokes unearthed this badly decomposing head of a blonde-haired little oh. Okay. Huh. Wow, huh. Yeah, there's just... Okay. They just... No, they do not mince words on this one at all. They just get straight into it. Straight into it. It would be an understatement to say that he was taken aback when his heavy strokes unearthed the badly decomposing head of a blonde-haired little girl. Nevins promptly reported the situation to authority. The girl was identified as Karen Paulson, 11, reported as missing a year and a half prior. Girl, there's no way that it's still decomposing in the ground a year and a half later. That's just a fucking skull, bro. Efforts were made to track down the programmer of Pale Luna, but the nearly anonymous legal gray area in which the software swapping community operated inescapably led to many dead ends. Collectors have been known to offer up upwards of 6 figures for an authentic copy of the game. The rest of Karen's body was never found. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, I thought that was a really good, like, run-up. And then as soon as I saw the coordinates, I was like, dead body. Dead body. Dead body. It was very, very predictable. Very predictable. It was spooky. I still, like, it was still spooked. And, you know, I appreciate that it didn't jump the gun. I appreciate that there wasn't a ghost in the machine, you know? Sometimes that's way, way harder to believe for me. So, you know, eccentric programmer, serial killer that also is a video game programmer on the side and makes a text-based adventure game admitting to his murder. Sure, fine. I like that. It's grounded. It's way more realistic. It's got a little spook to it. It's got a little pizzazz. It's got a little spice. It's simple. I feel like they really just like, they just like completely ate shit at the end. I thought this ending was not good. Because it's like, oh, wow, he's in the forest. I wonder what he's going to find. And then there's no buildup. There's no suspense. There's no intrigue. It's just, and then he literally in like a fucking in the same paragraph as he finds the patch of dirt, he also finds a head. It's like, there's nothing interesting about it at all. There's nothing like, it's not like he unearths a tufts of hair and feels sick or something. And then whatever is, you know, he's like disgustingly unearthing this badly decomposing corpse. It was just rushed as hell. It felt like they wanted to end it so fucking bad. So I give it out of 10. I give it a 5. I give it a 5. I got high standards though, so 5 isn't that bad. 5 is I'm glad I read it. 5 is I'm glad I read it. Probably wouldn't read it again. But I did enjoy it. I need a lightning sound effect. This one is the number 3 all-time on r/no sleep. This one was created by Malia Girl 1314. My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I ever noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she would normally do. So she's a fucking wet rag. Sounds boring. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. Dump her. Dump her. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But what was so strange about this, it's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I would have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen, making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. Girl, treat yourself. You do deserve better than Dunkin' Donuts, you okay? Come on, not Dunkin' Donuts. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards my front door. Cheers to that. Coffee cheers. Yum, yum. I hurried down the hall towards the front door, and when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me, I could only see her eyes, and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Jeez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird, and just totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her, called her a weirdo, and as I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. You just get jump scared by your wife. It's not that serious. I don't like horror movies either. What the fuck? I mean, that's why we'll never work out, puppy. I'm sorry. I'm here for the spooks. Welcome on in. My college had an event, and I met some furries. Yo, fuck yeah. I'm divorcing you, my trad wife. Anyway, so this guy's wife is being a weirdo. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 in the morning and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing over the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked at the door and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. Ugh. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with unblinking wide eyes and grinning. Grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed. I screamed. I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason, at the moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen, in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. That's fucked, dude. Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps. That's creepy. I'm imagining like getting up at 2 in the morning and my partner like staring at me and then like scurrying away on all like fours. That would be weird. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to her bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I'd dreamt the entire thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. What was that about last night? I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. You were peeking at me again, from over there, I said, pointing to the spot of the floor by the island kitchen. Kitchen island. The island kitchen. The island themed the tropical kitchen. Get yourself a fucking coconut. Put a straw in that bitch. You were peeking at me. From over there, I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that? I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even. She teased. Yeah, but like that's weird though. Like waking up at 2 a.m. to like freak out your partner is weird. I'm sorry. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been, seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. And she's not denying it neither. She laughed about it, which is all but a confirmation, in my opinion. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not even known she was there at all, had the trunk's hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. Straight people, oh, straight people will do literally anything except talk to each other, I swear to God. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think that when she was done with her weird prank. Oh, I totally butchered that. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking, and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around a corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I got home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Girl, at this point, why don't you just go, hey, listen, you're really freaking me out and it's really like scaring me and I'm like really anxious all the time when I'm in my own house. Can you like stop? And then if she's like, no, then get out of the house. Then I'm divorcing you. You're a weirdo and you're causing me mental distress. I'm distressed. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9, who the fuck plays games on their laptop? Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtains, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. Oh my god, dude. I'm scared of bitches peeking at me in the shower. That's like one of the scariest things to me. You're so fucking scared and vulnerable and naked and wet and slippery, and it's just such a vulnerable spot. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel so scared in my own home and made to hide in this bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. Yeah, it's getting a little bit more than annoying. If you jump scare me in the fucking bathroom with your creepy ass fucking eyes, like what if I fell in the bathtub and I hurt myself? I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet, I wondered if I heard it at all, then complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not able to hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it, I yelled and pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. My wife! I waited another 30 minutes or so, which felt like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I was going to spend the night hiding in the bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully, I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time, I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door in slow motion and locked eyes with my wife, who is peeking out from the slight gap. She's in the fucking closet. Girl, June was months ago. You don't have to be scared. You don't gotta be lonely no more. You don't gotta pay for this. You don't gotta be another rose at my door. There's another heartache on my list. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque gaping smile I've ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. I'm imagining like a Minecraft zombie noise. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open, and I ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and my phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house from about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't even check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked what had happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, Hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I'd wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this is definitely not what I had in mind. I mean, like, they haven't had a conversation since this has all happened. Like, I'm imagining what happens in the interim. Like, after she scares the shit out of it, she's like, oh, haha, my wife is so silly. And these things keep happening over and over and over again until you're literally scared in your own home and you won't just be like, shake her by the shoulders and be like, girl, what the hell are you doing? Stop! Hi, Ari. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside that closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to... Oh, so she was in the bathroom with him the entire time? Oh, for like an hour? Ooh, I thought it was the closet in the bedroom. It was the closet in the bathroom. Oh. That's fucking horrifying. Every time, blah, blah, blah. She never let me use the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back to home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris eventually ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. Do not cross the Ambien with the fucking psychoactive drug, as we just learned from that other story. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any creepy shit anymore. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that, when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling, almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window, besides the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me that she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid. Anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. Honestly, I'd be the same way at this point. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palms against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home. Now, I shouted. She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she'd never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs. As if Lynn could hear them from her place outside, her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the glass window, Lynn was gone. The only signs she'd been there at all were 2 streaks of drool dripping down the glass. I tried to explain to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. Oh yeah, normal wife nightmares. Normal thing to have in a heterosexual relationship. The old wife nares. Yup. It was probably just an animal outside. Can't they look at the saliva streaks and be like, nah, girl, that's a fucking, that was a creature right there. Can we talk? Wait. I called out of work that day and turned my cell phone off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at this point. I really started to believe that something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we would never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and I saw dozens of texts she sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. Good morning, Fives! Must have been the wind. And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me, that she wanted me home, how worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book or a no sleep post. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me she was picking up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have a lot more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from the situation, but if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon. And thankfully, I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She made us both sandwiches for lunch, and I wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I'd been dealing with.
People change, Ben. She's still the same woman you've married. Maybe you just need to talk through your issues.
Yeah, she became a fucking horror movie villain. Yeah, but maybe you can learn to love again. I'm wondering what would happen if he actually loved seeing his wife peeking at him. Like if he was always like, oh Lynn, you're so good. Like he's in the shower and then his wife like peeks at him and he's like, and then they both laugh together. Like, do you think he could fall in love with his wife demon all over again? Like a brand new romantic comedy? The wife in my closet? The wife under the bed? The wife that came from under the bed? Oh, good title. Ooh. Insane couple rom-com. That would be awesome. She said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her. I said, the words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she says. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so much upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually, as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her, it wasn't. She stopped by this morning after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said you weren't. I asked her if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no, just let you sleep. She said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No. She looked awful, though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her help she needed, but I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she hadn't committed a crime. Not yet, at least. The police would probably said that I was overreacting, but this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong. Dangerous, even. Like something sinister lurked behind her smile. Do you like my bread? Woof? Yes? Huh? Oh my gosh, that emote's crazy, bro. The fucking baguette bong. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She obviously had been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed, so I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to. Believe me, ain't nothing. If the wife is bad, the stepmother's worse. Am I right, fellas? Come on, let's go fishing. She just wasn't a very warm person, and it wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura, and it felt like she was permanently on the offensive. Ooh, thank you for the sniff, Waffy Woof. I only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits, I got the impression that she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as if she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company always felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so I didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did, so I grit my teeth and did what I had to do.
Yes,
she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation.
I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I could spare a moment, Ben. What does you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is it that you want from me? She asked.
I could almost see her standing there with her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you've ever noticed odd behavior, or possibly any mental issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I could tell was because she was just thinking, or something else. After a while, she finally spoke.
I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said before, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother, you would as well. I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me.
She snapped. Oh my gosh, what a bitch. This bitch sucks. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up. For some reason, I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn, I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath, as if she was trying to hold her steely persona together, but failing, persona mentioned. Marianne, what's wrong? I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. Okay, she's like, nope, my daughter's your problem now, bitch. Oh, no, you put a ring on it. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand it. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remembered the last words spoke to me. Seek professional help, she'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she said that, as if it were important. Very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals. But maybe someone was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel completely comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needs psychiatric help. I didn't tell them anything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden from me in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Yeah, I'm guessing this has happened before and she just doesn't want to deal with it again. That's the vibe I'm getting too, Captain. I'm getting the vibe that this mother is like washing her hands of this. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly was the best recourse. I agreed to do it this way. At least I wouldn't be going alone into that house. We drove over this morning just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began to do somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. Ooh, where is she? The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought we'd seen her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked into the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floors around this? Shit? Chris mumbled. Shut up, I said, my eyes darting around for signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All of the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. Oh, she's a fucking like demon vampire girl. If I hadn't left just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house had to be abandoned. We have moved through each room, carefully checking any place she might hide, occasionally calling her name. What the fuck are you looking under the couch? Why the fuck are you looking under the couch? Chris asked eventually. Aren't we looking for your wife? He was looking at me like I was a moron. Let's just go upstairs, I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. What? This bitch is just like home aloneing the house? I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the stairs had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken that photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would be the source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. Apple Wexy, thanks for the sub, dude.
Hi, gay blue creature.
Welcome on in, Apple. Hope you're doing great. We're reading a creepypasta. A no-sleep creepypasta. Ugh. This one's called My Wife Keeps Peeking at Me from Around Corners. I was hesitant to go into the bedroom, my fear from the night coming back to me all at once. Hi, 24! Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that, so we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something, Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. Dude, thanks for the gift sub, Apple. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Thank you very much. Happy Halloween, dude. Thank you for the treat. Woof. I get lots of treats today. Woof. Mwah. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them, and shuddered at that thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction, but fuck me, your wife's in here collecting eyeballs! This is no time for one-liners, Chris! Oh, jeez, and I thought my wife's shoe addiction was bad, but your wife's here collecting eyeballs. Be serious for a second, Chris. Jesus. Ben, I think we should go, he called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. All right, I grabbed my duffel bag and shut the door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that, Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help, I said. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist, he says. You coming or what? I couldn't stand the smell any. His words died in his throat and his eyes grew wide in fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered, as I finally saw what we missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife.
You didn't check under the fucking bed? You check under the couch, you don't check under the bed? How do you get under the couch even? It's way easier to get under the bed. You didn't check under a fucking bed in your own damn house? Are you... Chat, is he stupid? She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her.
It was unnerving to say the least. Wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it anyway. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Hi, Shads! Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if they were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that, I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approached her like some dangerous kind of animal. I love you, Lynn, I said, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. I crouched down so I could see her better, and immediately I saw the blood. Her hands were covered in blood. They trembled more as I got closer, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Apple, thanks for the gift sub to Wolf Pup, dude. I really appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much. That's so fucking generous of you, dude. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on the skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb its way up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out here on her own. Hi, Killa! But I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The exciting hiccuping noise got louder, and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then I could see the blood oozing from in between the fingers. Oh my god, Lynn, you're bleeding, I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang outward towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping onto the carpet. I looked at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. You all right in there, Chris? You all right in there, Ben? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus has shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off of her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shards still in her fist. Chris, run, go! I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later, I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn, Chris said. You all playing hide and seek? This guy's so fucking stupid. Does he not see all the blood coming from Ben? How is this guy? This guy has the survival instincts of a fucking potato. Oh my god. Move your ass, Chris, I said quietly but firmly as possible. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. I only want to help, I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 steps at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I don't know. That's probably what it sounds like. I shook her off of me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still in line with 911. I watched in the rearview mirror, sure I'd seen her there running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER and I got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow, I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I'd been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needed. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. I found you. And a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eyes. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. Ooh, ooh, spooky, spooky. Ooh, wow. Honestly, again, I feel like the final encounter wasn't as scary as the initial inception of the story. I felt like the story was really, really scary when it was just his wife randomly like staring at him. I like the direction they took with it, but I wish it leaned more into the like seeking out somebody specific to help. Like, you know, following that trail of like the paranormal, whatever that's happening to her. Because from what it sounds like, from what I'm understanding from this, hi Maverick! From what I'm understanding from this is that like this girl has been like taken over by some sort of demon. She's being possessed. And if I had to guess, this happened when she was a child as well. And maybe the mother knows. And maybe they had her like exercised as a child, but maybe like the demon repossessed her or something. That's what I'm guessing. Paranormal stuff was heavily implied, but never really properly addressed. And I felt like it didn't necessarily need to be like fully explained in depth. I just felt like it should have had a more prominent role in the story, because when it's just like her with the knife and she just is trying to like stab the dude with a knife, it's like, okay. Like at that point, they're leaning really heavily on him being the husband of the person affected, because that adds, you know, an additional emotional level of connection, and you don't want to hurt them, but they're literally like stabbing you with a shard of glass. It's like, okay, the second you stab me with a shard of glass, bitch, we're gonna take a time out and try again tomorrow. Like, no. I'm not continuing with my efforts after you fucking stab me. Yeah, the professional help foreshadowing didn't ever pan out. That's what I thought. Woo! Oh my goodness. So, were you scared? Were you frightened? Did you feel your life flashing before your eyes? And did you learn a lesson? These are the important questions you should be asking yourself. Personally, I've learned to never play video games, never play tabletop games, and never ever mix Ambien and strange psychoactive chemicals. I hope you have a spooktacular Halloween, and stay safe. I'll be seeing you very soon. Ooh! Ha! Ha!